Greetings. I'm going to take a few minutes to share with you some of the research from our report, Stationary Energy Storage Without Batteries, Grid, Microgrid, Uninterruptible Power Supplies, and Railway and Tram Trackside is what it covers, and you see the title before you. This is the report. Firstly, there is not just a considerable problem with having the favorite battery used in energy storage, stationary energy storage, which is lithium-ion, used for the newer applications in terms of its performance in the job, but there are also serious issues and indeed deaths and injuries ongoing with both factories making those batteries, facilities using them in large stationary storage, and facilities recycling those batteries. And then there are these other ones you see. We're enthusiastic about compressing of air and liquefying of air. And there may be some place for other things, but supercapacitors are tending to replace flywheels. Thermal energy storage has its issues, but is well worth a look. So we cover all this in the report with many examples of research programs, actual trials out there, and actual deployments. The market is a growing one, and it is certainly true that at the moment there is little or no storage from summer to winter, but the trend now, where it's obvious, it's fully accepted now, that grids can be entirely renewables, the prime candidates obviously being wind turbines and solar, photovoltaics particularly, and we're already seeing over-specifying deliberately good practice by which your solar is so low cost that you specify it so that you have so much that in some systems as the sun just rises and the sun finally just nearly sets, you still get some very good electricity, but it does mean that at peak sunshine, peak daylight, you're creating a tremendous excess. So curtailment, where we basically don't use what we can produce, is getting greater, and therefore the market that has been a bit academic about summer to winter is now going to become a considerable need, considerable opportunity, and we'll come back to that. So this is looking at typical sort of detail that we have in the report. I won't wade through all of it, but we do profiles of the companies and compare them as to who we feel is doing the good things and so on, and lots of jargon, I'm afraid, but because there are so many variants, but basically the options here in terms of days of storage, the new market of summer to winter, and the power capacity in megawatts that you can install, there are now supercapacitor banks up to megawatts, and in their output, not an enormous lot of megawatt hours, but they have their place there. So they're one extreme, and the other extremes where most of the money will go. You have all these candidates here, which are various forms of gravity storage and so on. When you want to go up to summer to winter, there's not that much choice, but what there is looks very promising. So let's just go a little closer to some of them. For example, the railways of the world have to get rid of diesel. They're rapidly going electric, even on branch lines, light rail, where you can't afford a catenary, you put a battery in the train, or there's some work on putting a fuel cell in the train with hydrogen. And so it is now considered feasible to make all of the world's trains and trams electric. And in doing that, a very efficient way of managing the electricity on a rail or a tram system is not to carry your energy storage with you other than for motive power, but when they break and generate a very fast pulse of energy that batteries can't cope with very well, certainly they don't efficiently grab most of it, they just grab some of it, then trackside supercapacitors work extremely well, and they then shoot out the electricity to a train that's about to get going. So in managing that, you can certainly save at least 15% of your total electricity bill in a railway system. So there's some stationary energy storage, and I've touched on it briefly, but supercapacitors have some place as they go into, for instance, backup systems with hospitals, where these uninterruptible power supplies, when they're supercapacitors, they double as peak shaving and so on, very fast response to manage the electrical load when they're not required as uninterruptible backup power supplies. But basically batteries are very dominant for uninterrupted power supplies, and some other things are coming in. But as we move across, we see that emerging markets are not just that long-term storage, but in the smart cities, they are going to be capable of food independence, water independence, and yes, energy independence. There's great worries with global warming that the long power lines going across a country are being blown down far more often, the weather getting more violent, and also terrorism. And we will be modernizing grids. We do need grids, I'm not arguing that, but cities will often make their own power and simply use the grid as backup. And in that situation, within the city, you may have at the edge of the city a huge tower being built that then lets down, like the grandfather clock, the weight, and at 6 months intervals is taking in power and letting out power after another 6 months, and so on. But within a city, there is really, the primary thing is distributed energy. You're going to have distributed solar power and water power and many other things throughout your smart cities. And when you have that, as Edison said in 1880, make electricity where you're going to use it. He could well have said also, and store it where you're going to use it. So there's going to be distributed storage, stationary storage. We're not talking about vehicles at this point. And that is covered in the report and is an emerging market for different formats, employing various of the things we're talking about and other options. So they all have to be scoped against these many existing and emerging needs. And here is a glimpse of stationary energy storage beyond pumped hydro and batteries in 20 years from now.